All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another thrilling installment of Story Fellowship, starring our amazing reader, Dennis Jones. And we are now on book 2 of the Rick Riordan series, Magnus Chase and the Gods of Asgard. So this is Magnus Chase and the Hammer of Thor. And we last left off having just finished chapter 12. And I think to refresh our memory, Dennis will read a small excerpt from the tail end of chapter 12 just to get us in mind of where we were at. So having said that, Dennis, take it away.
Hi, everybody. Sam started right through me. She seemed to be watching the horizon, imagining a mushroom cloud rising from the nuke Loki had dropped on her future. I have to try, Magnus. The wit's tomb. First thing in the morning. I hated this idea. Unfortunately, I didn't have a better one. Fine. You contacted Hearth and Blitz. They're meeting us on Cape Cod. She rose and crumpled up the wedding invitation. Before I could object that we might need it, she tossed it into the ravens and wolves. Meet you after breakfast and bring a coat. It'll be a chilly morning to fly.
That's right. So we found out that Samara Alabas knew about this arranged marriage, and it was dropped on her in front of her grandparents by Loki himself. So now they have to try to prevent it.
Mute. Relax, it's just a little death prophecy. Sure enough, once 13. Relax, it's just a little death prophecy. Sure enough, once Jack became a pendant again, I passed out for 12 hours. In the morning, I woke with sore arms and legs, feeling like I'd spent the whole night flapping through the air with an enhargy hanging from my ankle. Alex Furio was conspicuously absent from breakfast, though TJ assured me he'd slipped a note under her door. Explaining where the lounge was for floor 19. She's probably still asleep, TJ said. She had a big first day, unless she's that mosquito right there. Halfborn pointed to an insect crawling across the salt shaker. That you, Furio? The mosquito said nothing. My friends promised to stay on high alert, ready to do whatever we needed to help stop Loki from holding his shotgun wedding in 4 days. We'll also keep an eye on Furio, Mallory promised, scowling at the mosquito. I just had time to scarf down a bagel before Sam arrived and led me to the stables above the floor, 422 exercise room. Whenever Sam said we were going to fly, I couldn't. Yup. We're going to. I couldn't be sure what she meant. Valkyries were okay. So whenever Sam said we're going to fly, I couldn't be sure what she meant. Valkyries were perfectly capable of flying on their own. They were strong enough to carry at least one other person, so maybe she intended to put me in a large tote bag and scalp me to Cape Cod and shelp me to Cape Cod. Or she might have meant fly, as in we're going to tumble off a cliff and plummet to our deaths. We seem to spend a lot of time doing that. Today, she meant riding a flying horse. I wasn't clear on why Valkyries have flying horses, probably just because they looked cool. Besides, nobody wanted to ride into battle on a lindworm, flapping and bouncing around like a turkey snake cowboy. Sam saddled a white stallion. She climbed on his back and pulled me up behind her. Then we galloped out the gates of the stable, straight into the skies above Boston. She was right about the cold. That didn't bother me, but the winds were strong and Sam's high jab kept fluttering into my mouth. Since high jabs represented modesty and pity, I doubted she wanted hers to look like I'd been chewing on it. How much further? I asked. She glanced back. The bruise under her eye had faded, but she still seemed distracted and exhausted. I wondered if she'd slept at all. Not long now, she said. Hang on. I'd flown with Sam under enough times to take that warning seriously. I clenched my knees against the horse's rib cage. I wrapped my hands around Sam's waist. As we plunged straight through the clouds, I may have screamed, "Mind Fritcher!" My butt went weightless in the saddle. FYI, I do not like having a weightless butt. I wondered if Sam flew her airplane like this, and if so, how many flight instructors she had sent into cardiac arrest. We broke through the clouds in front of us. Cape Cod stretched to the horizon. A parenthesis of green and gold in the blue sea, directly below the northern tip of the peninsula, made a gentle circuit around Provincetown Harbor. A few sailboats dotted the bay, but it was too early in the spring for many visitors. Sam leveled us off at about 500 feet and flew us along the coast, racing up over dunes and marshes, then following the arc of Commercial Street with its gray shingled cottages and neon painted gingerbread houses. The shops were mostly shut down, the streets empty. Just scouting, Sam told me, making sure an army of giants isn't hiding behind the Montcursor tattoo shop, or sea trolls, or weights, or my father, or yeah, I get the idea. Finally, she banked us left, heading for a gray stone tower that loomed on a hill at the edge of town. The granite structure rose about 250 feet and had a structured top that resembled a fairy tale castle. I had a vague memory of seeing the tower during my visit here as a kid, but my mom had been more interested in hiking the dunes and walking the beaches. What is that place? I asked Sam. Our destination. A faint smile tugged at her mouth. The first time I saw it, I thought it was the minaret for a mosque. What? Or a mosque. For a mosque. It looked sort of like one, but it's not. She laughed. No, it's a memorial for the pilgrims. They landed here before they moved to Plymouth. Of course, my friends at Mosque. She has an
No, you skipped a line.
Did I? Of course. Okay, you want to read, John? I'm not. Yeah, you should start reading.
Are you sure? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Of course, Muslims have been in America for a long time too. One of my friends at mosque, she has an ancestor, Yusuf Ben Ali, who served with George Washington during the American Revolution. She stopped herself. Sorry, you didn't want a history lesson. Anyway, we're not here for the tower. We're here for what's underneath. I was afraid she wasn't talking about the gift shop. We flew around the monument, scanning the clearing at its base. Just outside the tower's entrance, sitting on the stone retaining wall and swinging their feet like they were bored, were my two favorite people from alien worlds. Blitz, I yelled. Hearth! Hearth was deaf, so yelling his name didn't do much good, but Blitzen nudged him and pointed us out. They both jumped off the ledge and waved enthusiastically as our horse came in for a landing. Kid! Blitzen jogged toward me. He could have been mistaken for the ghost of a tropical explorer. From the rim of his pith helmet, a screen of white gauze covered him down to his shoulders. The gauze, I knew, was custom designed to block sunlight, which turns dwarves to stone. He'd also put on leather gloves to protect his hands. Otherwise, he was wearing the same outfit I'd seen in my dreams. A walnut three-piece suit with a black bow tie, snappy pointed leather shoes, and a bright orange handkerchief for flair. Just the thing for a day excursion into a tomb of the undead. He tackled me with a big hug, almost losing his pith helmet. His cologne smelled like rose petals. Hammers and anvils, I'm glad to see you. Hearthstone ran up next, smiling faintly and waving both palms in the ASL gesture for yay. For Hearth, this was the equivalent of ecstatic fanboy screaming. He wore his usual black leather jacket and jeans with his twister dot scarf wrapped about his neck. His face was as pale as ever with the perpetually sad eyes and the spiky platinum hair, but he had fleshed out a bit in the past few weeks. He looked healthier, at least by human standards. Maybe they'd been ordering a lot of pizza while they hid out in Mimir's safe house. Okay. You guys, I pulled Hearth into a hug. You look exactly like when I saw you in the bathroom. In retrospect, that was probably not the line to lead with. I backed up and explained what had been going on. The weird dreams, the weirder reality, Loki in my head in a pickle jar, Mimir's head in the bathtub, etc. Yeah, Blitzen said. The capo loves to show up in the bathtub. Almost scared me out of my chainmail pajamas one night. That's an image I did not need, I said. Also, we have to have a talk about communication. You guys just disappeared on me without a word. Hey, kid, it was his idea. He signed this for Hearth's benefit. Pinky touching the forehead, then pointing at Hearth with two fingers. Idea. His. H for Hearthstone's name sign. Hearthstone grunted in irritation. He signed back, to save you, dummy. Tell Magnus. He made an M for my name sign, a fist with three fingers wrapped over his thumb. Blitzen sighed. The elf is overreacting as usual. He got me all terrified and hustled me out of town. But I've calmed down. It was just a little death prophecy. Oh, jeez. Here we go. Sam untangled her backpack from the horse's saddlebags. She patted the horse's muzzle and pointed toward the sky, and our white stallion buddy took off for the clouds. Blitzen, she turned. You understand there's no such thing as a little death prophecy, right? I'm fine. Blitzen gave us a confident smile. Through the gauze netting, he looked like a slightly happier ghost. A few weeks ago, Hearthstone got back from his one-on-one rune magic class with Odin. He was all excited to read my future, so he cast the runes, and, well, they didn't come out so good. Not so good? Hearthstone stopped his foot. Blitzen. Bloodshed. Cannot be stopped. Before Ostara. Right, Blitzen said. That's what he reads in the runes, but what's Ostara? I asked. Oh, it's the first day of spring, Sam said, which is in 4 days. Same day as your supposed wedding. Oh, believe me, she said sourly, it wasn't my idea. Okay, so Blitzen is supposed to die before that? My stomach started climbing up my throat. Bloodshed, that cannot be stopped? Hearthstone nodded emphatically. You shouldn't be here. I agree, I said. It's too dangerous. Guys! Blitzen tried for a hearty chuckle. Look, Hearthstone is new at reading the future. Maybe he misinterpreted. Bloodshed might actually be toolshed. See, a toolshed that cannot be stopped. That would be a good omen. Hearthstone held out his hands as if to strangle the dwarf, which needed no translation. Besides, Blitz said, if there's a tomb here, it'll be underground. You need a dwarf. Hearth launched into a fury of angry signs, but Samara stepped in. Blitz is right, she said, signing the message with a hot potato fist bump. Both index fingers extended. She'd gotten good at ASL since meeting Hearthstone, just, in her spare time between gathering souls, making honor roll, and flying jet planes. This is too important, she said. I wouldn't ask you otherwise. We have to find Thor's hammer before the first of spring, or entire worlds will be destroyed, or I'll have to marry a giant. Another way, Hearth signed. Must be one. Don't even know hammer is here. Buddy, Blitz took the elf's hand, which was kind of sweet, but also kind of rude, because it was the ASL equivalent of putting a gag on someone's mouth. I know you're worried, but it'll be fine. Blitz turned toward me. Besides, as much as I love this elf, I'm going crazy in that safe house. I'd rather die out here being useful to my friends than keep on watching TV and eating delivery pizza and waiting for Mimir's head to pop up in the bathtub. Also, Hearthstone snores like you wouldn't believe. Hearth yanked his hands back. You're not signing, but I can read lips, remember? Hearth, Sam said, please. Sam and Hearth had a strange contest. So intense. Had a staring contest so intense, I could feel ice crystals forming in the air. I'd never seen those two so much at odds before, and I did not want to be in the middle. I was tempted to summon Jack and have him sing a Beyonce song, just to give him a common enemy. At last, Hearthstone sighed. If anything happens to him, I take responsibility, Sam mouthed. I can read lips too, Blitzen said, and I can take responsibility for myself. He rubbed his hands together eagerly. Now, let's find the entrance to this barrow, eh? It's been months since I unearthed a malicious undead power. Chapter 14. Cry me a blood river. Wait, actually, don't. Just like the good old days, marching together into the unknown, searching for missing magical weapons, and risking painful death. I miss my buddies. We walked halfway around the base of the tower before Blitzen said, Aha! He knelt and ran his gloved fingertips along a crack in the paving stones. To me, it didn't look any different from the thousands of other cracks in the stone. But Blitzen seemed to like this one. He grinned up at me. Now you see, kid, you never would have found this without a dwarf. You would have walked around forever looking for the entrance to the tomb, and that crack is the entrance? It's the trigger for the entrance, yeah. But we'll still need some magic to get in. Hearth, double check this for me, will you? Hearth crouched next to him. He nodded like, yep, then traced a rune on the floor with his finger. Immediately, a 10-foot square section of pavement vaporized, revealing a shaft that plunged straight down. Unfortunately, the four of us happened to be on that 10-foot square when it vaporized. We dropped into the darkness with a fair amount of screaming, most of which was mine. Ah! Good news. When I landed, I didn't break any bones. Bad news. Hearthstone did. I heard a wet snap, followed by Hearth's grunt, and I knew immediately what had happened. I'm not saying elves are fragile. In some ways, Hearth was the toughest guy I knew, but on occasion, I wanted to wrap him in blankets and slap a handle with care sticker on his forehead. Hold on, man, I told him, which was useless since he couldn't see me in the dark. I found his leg and quickly located the break. Hearth gasped and tried to claw the skin off my hands. What's going on? Blitz demanded. Whose elbow is this? That's me, Sam said. Everyone okay? Hearth has a broken ankle, I said. I need to fix it. You two, keep watch. It's totally dark, Blitz complained. You're a dwarf. Sam slipped her axe from her belt, a sound I knew well. I thought you thrived underground. I do, said Blitz, preferably in a well-lit and tastefully decorated underground. Judging from the echo of our voices, we were in a large stone chamber. There was no light, so I assumed the shaft we'd fallen through had closed above us. In the plus column, nothing had attacked us. Yet. I found Hearth's hand and made signed letters against his palm so he wouldn't panic. Heal you. Be still. Then I put both my hands on his broken ankle. I called on the power of Frey. Warmth blossomed in my chest and spread down my arms. My fingers glowed with a soft golden light. Pushing back the darkness, I could feel the bones in Hearthstone's ankle knitting together, the swelling subsiding, his circulation returning to normal. He let out a long sigh and signed, "Thanks." I squeezed his knee. "No problem, man." "So, Magnus," Blitz said, his voice hoarse, you might want to look around. One side effect of my healing power was that I temporarily glowed. I don't mean I looked healthy. I mean I actually glowed. In the daytime, it was hardly noticeable, but here in a dark subterranean chamber, I had looked like a human nightlight. Sadly, that meant I could now see our surroundings. We were in the middle of a domed chamber, like a giant beehive carved from rock. The apex of the ceiling, about 20 feet up, showed no sign of the hatch through which we'd fallen. All around the circumference of the walls, in closet-sized niches, stood mummified men in rotted clothing, their leathery fingers clasped around the hilts of corroded swords. I saw no exit from the room. "Well, this is perfect," I said. "They're going to wake up, aren't they? Those 10 guys." 12, Sam corrected. 12 guys with big swords, I said. My hand closed around my runestone pendant. Either Jack was trembling or I was. I decided it must be Jack. I mean, they could just be terrifying inanimate corpses, Blitz said. "Think positive." Hearthstone snapped his fingers for attention. He pointed to the sarcophagus that stood upright in the center of the room. It's not that I hadn't noticed it. The big iron box was hard to miss, but I've been trying to ignore it, hoping it would go away. The front was carved with ornate Viking images, wolves, serpents, and runic inscriptions, swirling around a central picture of a bearded man with a big sword. I had no idea what a coffin like this was doing on Cape Cod. I was pretty sure the Pilgrims hadn't brought it over on the Mayflower. Sam motioned for us to stay put. She levitated off the floor and floated around the sarcophagus, her axe ready. Inscriptions on the back too, she reported. This sarcophagus is old. I don't see any sign that it's been opened recently, but perhaps Thryme hid the hammer inside. "Here's an idea," Blitzen said. "Let's not check." I glanced at him. "That's your expert opinion?" "Look, kid, this tomb reeks of ancient power. It was built well over 1,000 years ago, long before Viking explorers got to North America." "How can you tell?" "The marks on the rock," Blitzen said. "I can tell when a chamber was hewn as easily as I can gauge the age of a shirt by the wear of the threads." That didn't sound very easy to me. Then again, I didn't have a degree in dwarven fashion design. "So it's a Viking tomb built before the Vikings got here?" I said. How is that possible?" "It moved," Hearth signed. "How can a tomb move?" Blitzen took off his pith helmet. The gauze netting left a cowlick across his otherwise perfect hair. "Kid, stuff moves in the 9 worlds all the time. We're connected by the world tree, right? The branches sway, new branches grow, roots deepen. This place has shifted from wherever it was originally built. Probably because, it's imbued with evil magic." Sam touched down next to us. "Not a fan of evil magic." Hearth pointed to the floor in front of the sarcophagus. I hadn't noticed before, but all around the base of the coffin, a faint circle of runes were etched in the stone. Hearth finger spelled Kenning. What's that? I asked. Samira edged a little closer to the inscription. A Kenning is a Viking nickname. You mean like, hey, Kenning, how's it going? No, Sam said. Sam said in that I'm going to hit you with the stupid sticks tone. It's a way of referring to somebody with a description instead of their name. Like instead of Blitzen, I might say clever of clothes, or for Hearthstone, Room Lord. Hearth nodded. You may call me Room Lord. Sam squinted at the inscription on the floor. Magnus, could you glow a little closer, please? What? I'm not your flashlight. But I stepped toward the coffin. It says Blood River, Sam announced. Over and over, all the way around. You can read Old Norse? I asked. Old Norse is easy. You want difficult? Try learning Blood River. Try learning Arabic. Blood River. My bagel breakfast sat heavy in my gut. Does this remind anybody of bloodshed that cannot be stopped? I don't like it. Even without his gauze netting, Blitz looked a little gray. It's probably a coincidence. However, I would like to point out there are no exits from this room. My dwarven senses tell me these walls are solid all the way around. We've walked into a loaded trap. The only way out is to spring it. I'm really starting to dislike your dwarven senses, I said. You and me both, kid. Hearthstone glared at Blitzen. You wanted to come here. What now? Breaking Kenning's circle? Open coffin? Sam readjusted her hijab. If there's a white in this tomb, it'll be in that sarcophagus. It's also the most secure place to hide a magical weapon, like a god's hammer. I need a second opinion. I pulled off my pendant. Jack sprung to life. Full length in my hand. Hey guys. Ooh, a tomb imbued with evil magic. Cool. Hey buddy, can you sense Thor's hammer anywhere around here? Jack vibrated with concentration. Hard to be sure. There's something powerful in that box. A weapon? Ooh, a magical weapon? Can we open it? Please, please. This is exciting. I resisted the urge to smack him upside the hilt, which would have only hurt me. You ever heard of an earth giant working with a white, like using its tomb as a safe deposit box? That would be strange, Jack admitted. Usually an earth giant just buries his stuff in, the earth, like deep, deep in the earth. I turned to Sam. So why would Otis send us here? And how is this a good idea? Sam glanced around the chamber like she was trying to decide which of the 12 mummies to hide behind. Look, maybe Otis was wrong. Maybe this was a wild goose chase, but we're here now, Jack said. Oh, come on, guys. I'll protect you. Besides, I can't stand an unopened present. At least let me shake the coffin to guess what's inside. Hearthstone made a chopping motion against his palm. Enough already. From the inside pocket of his jacket, he produced a small leather pouch, his collection of runestones. He pulled out one I'd seen before. Oh, wow. Hearthstone is pretty awesome, man.
True story.
That's Dagaz, I said. We use that for opening doors in Valhalla. Are you sure? Hearth's expression stopped me. He didn't need sign language to convey how he felt. He regretted this whole situation. He hated putting Blitzen in danger. But we were here now. We'd brought him along because he knew magic. He wanted to get this over with. Magnus, Sam said, you might want to step back. I did, positioning myself in front of Blitzen. Just in case Blood River sprang out of the coffin, samurai style, and went directly for the nearest dwarf. Hearth knelt. He touched Dagaz to the inscription. Instantly, the Blood River Kenning ignited like a ring of gunpowder. Hearth backed away as the sarcophagus's iron lid blew right off, hurtling past me and slamming into the wall. Before us stood a mummified king in silver crown and silver armor, with a sheathed sword clasped in his hands. Wait for it, I muttered. Naturally, the corpse opened his eyes. Bum, bum, bum. All right. Chapter 15. All in favor of slaughtering Magnus, please say aye. With most zombies, you don't expect conversation. I figured King Mummy would say roar, or at most brains, and then get down to the business of killing us. I was not ready for, thank you, mortals. I am in your debt. He stepped out of his coffin, a little unsteadily, since he was an emaciated corpse whose armor probably weighed more than he did, and did a tap dance of glee. 1,000 years in that stupid box, and now I'm free. Ah! Behind him, the inner walls of his coffin were scored with hundreds of marks where he'd been keeping track of years. There was no sign of Thor's hammer, though, which meant the zombie had been locked in there without a decent way to stream Netflix. Jack quivered with excitement. Will you look at that sword? She's so hot. I didn't know, one, how he could tell the sword was female, or two, how he could tell she was hot. I was not sure I wanted answers to those questions. Sam, Blitz, and Hearth edged away from the zombie. Jack's point floated toward the lady sword, but I forced him to the floor and leaned on him. I didn't want him to offend Mr. Zombie or his blade by being too forward. Hi, I told the zombie. I'm Magnus. You have a lovely golden glow. Thanks. So, how is it that you're speaking English? Am I? The king tilted his ghoulish head. Wisps of white clung to his chin, maybe cobwebs or the remnants of a beard. His eyes were green and bright and entirely human. Perhaps it's magic. Perhaps we are communicating on a spiritual level. Whatever the case, thank you for releasing me. I am Galir, Prince of the Danes. Blitzen peeked out from behind me. Galir? Is Blood River your nickname? Galir's laugh sounded like a maraca filled with wet sand. No, my dwarven friend. Blood River is a kenning I earned from my blade, the Skofnug sword. Clunk, clunk. Hearth had backed into the coffin lid and fallen over it. He stayed in crab walk position, his eyes wide with shock. Ah, Galir said. I see your elf has heard of my sword. Jack lurched under my elbow. Senor, I've heard of her too. She's like, wow, she's famous. Wait, Sam said. Prince Galir, is there possibly a hammer around here somewhere? We heard you might have a hammer. The zombie frowned, which caused fault lines to open on his leathery face. A hammer? No. Why would I want a hammer when I am the Lord of the Sword? Sam's eyes dimmed, or maybe that was just my glow starting to fade. You're sure? I asked. I mean, the Lord of the Sword is great, but you could also be, I don't know, the slammer of the hammer? Galir kept his gaze on Sam. His frown deepened. One moment. Are you a woman? Yes, Prince Galir. My name is Samira Al-Abbas. We call her the Max with the axe, I offered. I will hurt you, Sam hissed at me. A woman. Galir tugged at his chin, pulling off some of his cobweb whiskers. That's a shame. I can't unsheath my sword in the presence of a woman. Ah, what a bummer, Jack said. I want to meet Scoffy. Hearthstone struggled to his feet. He signed, we should leave, now, not let Zombie draw sword. What is your elf doing? Galir asked. Why does he make those strange gestures? Oh, it's sign language, I said. He doesn't want you to draw your sword. He says we should leave. Oh, but I can't allow that. I must show my gratitude. Also, I need to kill you. My glow is definitely fading now. When Jack spoke, his runes lit the tomb in ominous red flashes. Hey, zombie guy, Gratitude is usually more like sending a nice card and less like I need to kill you. Sounds like Jack is getting mad. Michael, oh, I'm very grateful, Galir protested, but I'm also a Drogur, the chief wight of this barrow. You are trespassing, so after I finish thanking you properly, I'll have to consume your flesh and devour your souls. But alas, the Scarfnug sword has very clear restrictions. It cannot be drawn in daylight or in the presence of a woman. Those are stupid rules, Sam said. I mean, those are very sensible rules. So you can't kill us? No, Galir allowed. But don't worry, I can still have you killed. He rapped the sheath of his sword 3 times against the floor. To absolutely no one's surprise, the 12 mummified warriors stepped out from their niches along the wall. The Draugr had zero respect for zombie cliches. They did not shamble. They didn't moan incoherently or act dazed like proper zombies should. They drew their weapons in perfect unison and stood ready for Galir's orders to kill. This is bad, said Jack, master of the obvious. I'm not sure I can take out this many before they kill you guys. And I don't want to look incompetent in front of that hot lady sword. Priorities, Jack, I said. Exactly. I hope you got a plan that makes me look good. Sam gave us a new light source. In her free hand, a glowing spear appeared, the field weapon of a Valkyrie. Its harsh white light made the zombies' faces start to steam. Hearthstone hefted his pouch of runestones. Blitzen whipped off his bow tie, which, like his entire line of spring fashion, was lined with ultra-flexible chainmail. He wrapped the tie around his fist, ready to smash some zombie faces. I didn't like our odds, 4 against 13, or 5 if you included Jack as a separate person. I didn't, because that meant I would have to pull my own weight. I wondered if I could invoke the Peace of Frey. Thanks to my dad, a pacifist-type god who didn't allow fighting in his sacred places, I could sometimes disarm everyone in a wide circle around me, blasting their weapons right out of their hands. That was kind of my finishing trick, though. I would look really dumb if I tried it now in this enclosed space and the zombies just picked up their swords again and killed us. Before I could decide what would be most impressive to a hot lady sword, one of the zombies raised his hand. Do we have a quorum? Prince Galir slumped as though one of his vertebrae had disintegrated. Arvid, he said. We've been locked in this chamber for centuries. Of course we have a quorum. We're all present because we can't leave. Then I move that we call this meeting to order, said another dead man. Oh, for the love of Thor, Galir complained. We're here to massacre these mortals, feed on their flesh, and take their souls. That's obvious. Then we'll have enough strength to break free of our tomb and wreak havoc upon Cape Cod. Do we really need... I second, called another zombie. Galir smacked his own skeletal forehead. Fine. All in favor. The 12 other dead guys raised their hands. Then this massacre meeting is called to order. Galir turned to me, his eyes gleaming with irritation. My apologies, but we vote on everything in this group. It's the tradition of the thing. What thing? You know, the thing, Galir said. From the word Thingvellir, meaning field of the assembly, the Norse voting council. Ah, Sam wavered between her axe hand and her spear hand, as if unsure which to use or whether that decision would require a new motion. I've heard of the thing. It was a site where ancient Norse met to settle legal disputes and make political decisions. The meetings inspired the idea of parliament. Yes, Galir said. Now, the English parliament, that wasn't my fault personally. But when the pilgrims came along, he pointed his chin toward the ceiling. Well, by that time, our tomb had been here for centuries. The pilgrims landed, camped out over us for a week. They must have subconsciously felt our presence. I'm afraid we inspired the Mayflower Compact, started all that business about rights and democracy in America, blah, blah, blah. May I take the minutes? Asked the zombie. Galir sighed. Dagfinn, honestly, fine, you're secretary. I love being secretary. Dagfinn stuck his sword back in his sheath. He pulled a notepad and pen from his belt. Though what a Viking corpse was doing with school supplies, I couldn't tell you. So, okay, so wait, Sam said. If you've been stuck in that box, how do you know what was going on outside the tomb? Galir rolled his lovely green eyes. Telepathic powers, duh. Anyway, ever since we inspired the pilgrims, my 12 bodyguards have been insufferably proud of themselves. We have to do everything by parliamentary rules, or thingamentary rules. Not to worry, though. We'll kill you soon enough. Now, I make a motion. First, another zombie interrupted. Is there any old business? Galir made a fist so tight I thought his hand would crumble. Newt, we are Draugr from the 6th century. For us, everything is old business. I move that we read the minutes from the last meeting, said Arvid. Do I hear a second? Hearthstone raised 2 fingers. I didn't blame him. The more time they spent reading the minutes of past massacres, the less time they'd have for killing us in the future one. Dagfinn flipped back in his notebook. The pages turned to dust in his fingers. Actually, I don't have those minutes. Well then, Galir said, moving right along. Wait, Blitzen cried. We need an oral accounting. I want to hear about your pasts. Who you are, why you we're all buried together, and the names and histories of all your weapons. I'm a dwarf. The heritage of things is important to me, especially if those things are going to kill me. I motion that you tell us everything. I second the motion, Samira said. All in favor? Every zombie raised his hand, including Galir, I guess out of habit, who then looked quite annoyed with himself. Jack shot into the air to make the vote unanimous. Galir shrugged, causing his armor and bones to creak. You're making this massacre very difficult, but all right. I will recount our story. Gentlemen at ease. The other zombies sheathed their swords. Some sat on the floor, others leaned against the wall and crossed their arms. Arvid and Newt retrieved bags of yarn and knitting needles from their niches and began to work on mittens. So, I am Galir, began the prince, son of Thorkel, a prince among the Danes. And this, he patted his sword, is Skofnung, the most famous blade ever wielded by a Viking. Present company accepted, Jack murmured. But oh man, Skofnung is a hot name. I didn't agree with him. I also didn't like the look of terror on Hearthstone's face. Hearth, you know this sword? The elf signed cautiously as if the air might burn his fingers. First belonged to King Hrolf. Was forged with souls of his 12 followers, all berserkers. What is he saying? Galir demanded. Those hand gestures are very annoying. I started to translate, but Blitzen interrupted, shrieking so loudly that Arvid and Newt dropped their knitting needles. That sword? Blitz stared at Hearthstone. The one with the stone? Your house? This made no sense to me, but Hearth nodded. Now you see, he signed. We should not have come. Sam turned her spear's light, making dust sizzle on the floor. What do you mean? What stone? And what does it have to do with Thor's hammer? Excuse me, Galir said. I believe I was speaking. If you came here looking for Thor's hammer, I'm afraid someone gave you very bad information. We have to live through this, I told my friends. There's a goat I need to kill. Galir continued. As I was saying, the Skofnung sword was created by a king named Hrolf. His 12 berserkers sacrificed their lives so their souls could instill the blade with power. Galir scowled at his own men, 2 of whom were now playing cards in their corner. Those were the days when a prince could find good bodyguards. At any rate, a man named Eid stole the sword from Hrolf's grave. Eid lent it to my father Thorkel, who sort of forgot to return it. My dad died in a shipwreck, but the sword washed ashore in Iceland. I found it and used it in many glorious massacres, and now, here we are. When I died in battle, the sword was buried with me, along with my 12 berserkers for protection. Dagfinn flipped a page in his notebook and jotted, for protection. Can I add that we expected to go to Valhalla? That we were cursed to stay in this tomb forever because your sword was stolen property, and that we hate our afterlives? No, Galir snapped. How many times do you want me to apologize? Arvid looked up from his half-finished mittens. I move that Galir apologize a million more times. Do I hear a second? Stop that, Galir said. Look, we have guests. Let's not air our dirtier undertunics, eh? Besides, once we kill these mortals and devour their souls, we'll have enough power to break out of this tomb. I can't wait to check out Provincetown. I imagine 13 zombie Vikings marching down Commercial Street, barging into the Wired Puppy Cafe coffee shop, and demanding espresso drinks at sword point. But enough old business, Galir said. Can I please introduce a motion to kill these intruders? I second. Dagfinn shook his ballpoint pen. I'm out of ink anyway. Oh, Blitzen said. We need more discussion. I don't know the names of these other weapons. And those knitting needles. Tell me about them. You're out of order, Galir said. I move that we be shown the nearest exit, I said. Galir stomped his foot. You're also out of order. I call for a vote. Dagfinn looked at me apologetically. It's a thing. You wouldn't understand. I should have attacked immediately while they were off guard, but that seemed undemocratic. All in favor, Galir called. Aye, the dead Vikings cried in unison. They got to their feet, put away their cards and various knitting projects, and drew their swords once again. Whew. Hearthstone unleashes his inner bovine, Chapter 16. Jack decided this was an excellent time to give me a training session. Despite being fully capable of fighting on his own, he had this strong belief that I should learn to wield him with my own power. Something about me being worthy and competent or whatever. The thing is, I sucked at swordplay. Also, Jack always decided to train me in the worst possible situations. Well, no time like the present, he yelled, turning heavy and unhelpful in my grip. Come on, man. I ducked the first blade that swung toward my head. Let's practice later on mannequins or something. Dodge left, Jack yelled. Your other left. Make me proud, senor. The Skofnung blade is watching. I was almost tempted to die just to embarrass Jack in front of the lady sword. But since I was outside Valhalla and my death would be permanent, I decided that particular plan might be short-sighted. The zombies crowded in. The cramped quarters were our only advantage. Each Draugr was armed with a broadsword, which requires about 5 feet of free space for effective swinging. 12 dead berserkers with broadswords surrounding a tight-knit group of defenders in a small chamber. I don't care how good you are in forming a quorum. You're just not going to be able to massacre those defenders very easily without hacking apart your comrades as well. Our melee turned into an awkward shuffle with a lot of shoving, cursing, and bad zombie breath. Samira thrust her spear under Arvid's jaw. The weapon's light burned away his head like a flame going through a toilet paper. Another zombie jabbed at Blitzen's chest, but Blitz's chainmail-lined vest bent the blade. Blitz slammed his bow-tie-wrapped fist into the zombie's gut, and much to everyone's disgust, got his hand stuck in the zombie's abdominal cavity. Gross! Blitzen proceeded to lurch backward, yanking the zombie along, swinging him like a clumsy dance partner, and knocking other Draugr out of the way. Hearthstone took the award for most improved in melee combat. He slammed down a runestone. He was immediately encased in golden light. He grew taller. His muscles swelled as though someone were inflating his clothes. His eyes turned bloodshot. His hair splayed with static. He grabbed the nearest zombie and tossed him across the room. Then he picked up another one and literally broke him in half over his knee. As you can guess, the other zombies backed away from the crazy, overinflated elf. What rune is that? I accidentally swung Jack through the top of Galir's sarcophagus, giving it a sunroof. Blitz yanked his hand free from his dance partner, who collapsed into pieces. Uruz, Blitz said, the rune of the ox. I silently added an Uruz rune to my Christmas wish list. Meanwhile, Samara cut through her enemies, twirling her spear in one hand like a shiny baton of death. Any zombie who managed to avoid going up in flames, she chopped down with her axe. Jack continued shouting unhelpful advice. Parry, Magnus, duck, defense pattern, Omega. I was pretty sure that wasn't even a thing. The few times I managed to hit a zombie, Jack cut him to pieces, but I doubted the moves were impressive enough to win Jack a date with the lady sword. When it became clear that Galir was running out of bodyguards, he leapt into battle himself, whacking me with his sheathed sword and yelling, Bad mortal, bad mortal. I tried to fight back, but Jack resisted. Probably he thought it would be unchivalrous to fight a lady, especially one who was stuck in her sheath. Jack was old-fashioned that way. Finally, Galir was the only drogier left. His bodyguards lay strewn across the floor in a ghastly collection of arms, legs, weapons, and knitting supplies. Galir backed toward his sarcophagus, cradling the Skofnung sword against his chest. Hold on. Point of order. I move that we table all further combat until Hearthstone objected to Galir's motion by rushing the prince and ripping his head off. Galir's body toppled forward, and our roid-raging elf stomped him flat, kicking and scattering the desiccated remains until there was nothing left but the Skofnung sword. Hearthstone started to kick that too. Stop him, Jack yelled. I grabbed Hearth's arm, which was definitely the bravest thing I'd done that day. He rounded on me, his eyes blazing with fury. He's dead, I signed. You can stop now. Chances were high that I was going to get decapitated again. Then Hearthstone blinked. His bloodshot eyes cleared, his muscles deflated, his hair settled against his scalp. He crumpled. But Blitzen and I were both there to catch him. We'd gotten used to Hearthstone's post-magic passouts. Sam stuck her spear into Dagfinn's corpse and left it standing up like a giant glow stick. She paced the tomb, cursing under her breath. I'm sorry, guys. All that risk, all that effort, and no Mjolnir. Hey, it's cool, Jack said. We rescued the Skofnung sword from her evil master. She's going to be so grateful. We have to take her with us. Blitzen waved his orange handkerchief in Hearth's face, trying to revive him. Taking that sword would be a very bad idea. Why? I asked. And why did Hearth look so freaked out when he heard its name? You said something about a stone? Blitz cradled Hearth's head in his lap, like he was trying to protect the elf from our conversation. Kid, whoever sent us here, it was a trap, all right. But the Draugr were the least dangerous thing in this chamber. Somebody wanted us to free that sword. A familiar voice said, You're absolutely right. My heart jackknifed. Standing in front of Galir's sarcophagus were the two men I least wanted to see in the Nine Worlds, Uncle Randolph and Loki. Behind them, the back panel of the sawed-off coffin had become a shimmering doorway. On the other side lay Randolph's study. Loki's scarred lips twisted into a grin. Good job finding the bride piece, Magnus. The sword is perfect. Oh, wow. Sorry, I just got chills. All right. I think we got time for one more chapter. Uncle Randolph gets on my naughty list big time. Chapter 17. Sam reacted fastest. She grabbed her spear and lunged towards her father. No, dear. Loki snapped his fingers. Instantly, Sam's legs buckled. She collapsed sideways on the floor and lay immobile, her eyes half closed. Her glowing spear rolled across the stones. Sam! I lurched toward her, but Uncle Randolph intercepted me. His bulk eclipsed everything. He gripped my shoulders, his breath an overwhelming combination of cloves and rotten fish. Don't, Magnus. His voice fractured with panic. Don't make it worse. Worse? I pushed him away. Anger hummed through my system. Jack felt light in my hand, ready to lash out. Seeing Samira unconscious at her father's feet, oh gods, I hope she was only unconscious. I wanted to blade smack my uncle. I wanted to go full Uruz on Loki's face. Give Randolph a chance, Annabeth's voice whispered in the back of my mind. He's family. I hesitated, just enough to notice Uncle Randolph's condition. His gray suit was threadbare and smeared with ashes, as though he'd been crawling through a chimney. And his face, his face. Across his nose, left cheek and eyebrow spread a horrible crater of red and brown scar tissue, a barely healed burn mark in the shape of a hand. I felt like a dwarf had punched through my abdominal cavity. I remembered the mark of Loki that had appeared on Randolph's cheek in the family photograph. I thought about my dream on the battlefield in Valhalla and recalled the searing agony on my own face when Loki had communicated with me using Randolph as a conduit. Loki had branded my uncle. I fixed my gaze on the god of trickery. He still wore the offensive green tuxedo he'd been modeling in my battlefield vision with his paisley bow tie at a rakish angle. His eyes gleamed as if he was thinking, "Go on, kill your uncle. This could be amusing." I decided not to give Loki the pleasure. "You tricked us into coming here," I growled. "Why? If you could just step through a magic doorway and into a coffin." "Oh, but we couldn't," Loki said. "Not until you opened the way. Once you did, well, you and Randolph are connected, or didn't you notice?" He tapped the side of his own face. "Blood is a powerful thing. I can always find you through him." "Unless I kill you," I said. "Randolph, get out of the way." Loki chuckled. "You heard the boy, Randolph. Step aside." My uncle looked like he was trying to swallow a horse pill. "Please, Loki, don't." "Wow." Loki raised his eyebrows. "It sounds like you're trying to give me an order, but that can't be right, can it? That would violate our agreement." The words "our agreement" made Randolph wince. He shuffled aside, his facial muscles twitching around the edge of his new scar. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Blitzen helping Hearthstone to his feet. I silently willed them to back away and stay safe. I didn't want anyone else in Loki's path. Sam still wasn't moving. My heart hammered against my ribs. I took a step forward. "Loki, what did you do to her?" The god glanced down at his daughter. "Who? Samira? She's fine. I just willed her to stop breathing." "You what?" Loki waved away my concern. "Not permanently, Magnus. I just like to keep a firm hand with my children. So many parents are lackadaisical these days, don't you think?" He controls them," Randolph croaked. Loki shot him an irritated look. Remember me, how well Remind me how well you did as a father, Randolph." "Oh, that's right. Your family is dead, and your only hope of seeing them again is me." Randolph curled inward, withering. Loki turned back to me. His grin sent a paisley pattern of ick crawling up my spine. "You see, Magnus, my children owe their powers to me. In exchange, they must bend to my will when I require it. It's only fair. As I said, family blood is a strong connection. It's a good thing you listened to me and left Alex in Valhalla. Otherwise, we'd have two of my children unconscious." He rubbed his hands together. "Now, would you like to see more? Samira's always so reluctant to shapeshift. Maybe I should force her into the shape of a cat for you. Or wallaby? She'd make a very cute wallaby." The paisley ick swirled into my stomach, threatening to erupt. Finally, I understood Samira's reluctance to shapeshift. "Every time I do it," she once told me, "I feel more of my father's nature trying to take hold of me." No wonder Sam was afraid Loki could make her go through with the marriage to the giant. No wonder she worried about Alex Fierro, who shapeshifted without a second thought. Did other gods have that kind of control over their children? Could Frey... No, I wouldn't allow myself to think about that. "Leave her alone." Loki shrugged. "As you wish. I merely needed her out of commission. No doubt Galir told you the Skofmung sword cannot be unsheathed in the presence of a woman. Fortunately, comatose women don't count. Randolph, hurry up now. This is the part where you draw the sword." Uncle Randolph licked his lips. Perhaps it would be better if..." His voice deteriorated into a guttural scream. "Ah!" He doubled over, smoke curling from the scar tissue on his cheek. My face burned in sympathy. "Stop it!" I yelled. My uncle gasped. He stood up, steam still rising from the side of his nose. Loki laughed. Randy, Randy, Randy. You look ridiculous. Now we've been through this before. You want your family back from Helheim? I require full payment in advance. You bear my mark. You do what I say. It's really not that hard. He pointed to the Skofnung blade. Fetch, boy. And Magnus, if you try to interfere, I can always make Sam's coma permanent. I hope you won't, though. It would be terribly inconvenient with the wedding coming up. I wanted to slice him down the middle like hell. I mean, his daughter Hel, who had two different sides. Then I wanted to glue him back together and slice him in half again. I couldn't believe I'd ever thought Loki was charismatic and silver-tongued. He called my uncle Randy. That by itself required the death penalty. But I didn't know the extent of Loki's control over Sam. Could he really make her permanently cataleptic with just a thought? I was also worried, sort of, about what might happen to Randolph. The idiot may have gotten himself into an evil bargain with Loki, but I understood why he'd done it. I remembered his wife, Catherine, on that sinking ship, Aubrey with her toy boat, Emma shrieking as she clutched her runestone inheritance, the symbol of all the dreams she would never grow up to realize. To my left, Hearthstone and Blitzen edged forward. Hearthstone had recovered enough to walk on his own. Blitz held a broadsword he must have retrieved from a zombie. I put out my hand, urging them to stay back. Randolph picked up the Skofnung sword. He drew it slowly from its sheath, a double-edged blade of cold gray iron. Along its central ridge, runes glowed faintly in every shade of blue, from permafrost to veined blood. Jack quivered. Oh, wow. Yes, indeed, Loki said. Now, if I could wield a blade, and I couldn't have the fabled sword of summer, I would choose the Skofnung sword. Dude may be evil, Jack whispered to me, but he has good taste. Unfortunately, Loki continued, in my present state, I'm not really all here. Blitzen grunted. First thing he said, I agree with. That sword should never be drawn. Loki rolled his eyes. Blitzen, son of Freya, you're such a drama dwarf when it comes to magic weapons. I can't wield Skofnung, no, but the chasers are descended from the Norse kings of old. They're perfect. I remembered Randolph telling me something about that, how the Chase family was descended from ancient Swedish royalty, blah, blah, blah. But I'm sorry if it qualified us to wield evil swords. I was not going to put that on my resume. Too dangerous. Hearthstone's signing was listless and weak. His eyes brimmed with fear. Death. The prophecy. So the blade has a few quirks, said Loki. I like quirks. It can't be used in the presence of women. It can't be drawn in daylight. It can only be used by one of noble lineage. Loki nudged Randolph's arm. Even this guy qualifies. Also, once the blade is drawn, it cannot be sheathed again until it has tasted blood. Jack buzzed with a metallic whimper. That's not fair. That is too attractive. I know, right? Loki said. And the last little quirk of the sword. Hearthstone, my friend. Would you like to tell them, or should I? Hearthstone swayed. He grabbed Blitzen's shoulder. I wasn't sure if it was for support or just to make sure the dwarf was still there. Blitzen hefted his broadsword, which was almost as tall as he was. Loki, you won't do this to Hearth. I won't let you. My dear dwarf, I appreciate you finding the tomb's entrance. And of course I needed Hearthstone to break the magic seal around that sarcophagus. You each played your part well, but I'm afraid I require just a bit more from you both. You want to see Samira happily married, don't you? To a giant? Blitzen snorted. No, but it's for a good cause. The return of what's-his-name's hammer. That means I need a proper bride price. And Thryme has asked for the Skofnung sword. It's a very reasonable exchange. The thing is, the sword isn't complete without the stone. The two are a set. What do you mean? I asked. What stone? The Skofnung stone. The whetstone that was made to sharpen the blade. With his thumbs and fingers, Loki made a circle about the size of a desert plate. About yay big, blue with gray flecks. He winked at Hearthstone. Sound familiar? Hearthstone looked as if his scarf was choking him. Hearth, I said. What's he talking about? My elf friend didn't answer. Uncle Randolph stumbled now, using both hands to hold up the cursed sword. The iron blade turned darker, and wisps of ice vapor twisted from its edges. It's getting heavier, Randolph gasped. Colder. Then we should hurry. Loki looked down at the unconscious form of Samira. Randolph, let's feed this hungry sword, shall we? No way. I raised my own blade. Randolph, I don't want to hurt you, but I will. My uncle let out a broken sob. Magnus, you don't understand. You don't know what he's planning. Randolph, Loki hissed, if you want to see your family again, strike! Randolph lunged, thrusting the cursed blade. And I completely misjudged his target. Stupid Magnus. Unforgivably stupid. I was only thinking about Sam lying helpless at Loki's feet. I needed to defend her. I wasn't thinking about prophecies or how everything Loki did, even a casual glance at his daughter, was a trick. I stepped to intercept my uncle's strike, but he charged right past me, and with a cry of horror, He buried Skofnung's sword in Blitzen's gut. Oh wow, guys. End of chapter 17. That's insane. The prophecy that Blitzen would die. Wow.
I think that's good.
I could try to read one more, but we may want to end it there tonight, guys. I hope everyone had a good time though. And I'm sorry that I had to take over. But Dennis had a long day at work. So
And you did a very good job, John.
did everyone enjoy
Yep.
it? Except for the part where we ended with this insanely powerful sword in the gut of Blitzen, you know? It's kind of a cliffhanger. What do you guys think?
I enjoyed.
Very interesting, yeah. Now it
Harry,
makes me
have you been
more
on the call this
interested
whole
to see what's
time?
gonna happen next.
I have.
Now I know.
Oh, there we go. Now I can actually hear you guys. So what do you guys think? I was accidentally mirroring it to my TV.
Well, so at first I had said you did a very good job covering for Dennis.
Thanks. Thank you. Not easy shoes to fill.
No, he does a really good job reading.
Yeah. I think this book is getting more and more intense by the second. So this whole thing was just a trap. They were trying to find Thor's hammer, and instead they took out this whole horde of zombies in order for Loki to just show up and grab this insane sword.
And I hate that I know what happens in the next chapter because this is such a cliffhanger here.
I know.
And it
I know.
only gets worse.
It probably does. Yeah. Yeah. No hero's journey is easy, but Magnus is definitely a hero, and I think he's going to be able to, you know, meet the challenge somehow. It's not going to be easy though. All I was thinking though is like if the sword has so many rules, it can't be drawn in sunlight. Can't Magnus like exude sunlight? Like he's the son of Frey. He's got the sword of summer, for crying out loud. He could
But
wield
he's
that
not
and
the
just,
sun.
I guess it's not literally the sun, but he could make sunlight look like it's there. Or they just gotta, get some smelling salts, wake up Samira, and suddenly the sword is drawn in the presence of a woman. And it'll be like, get me my hilt.
I'm just intrigued to find out that Loki has such control over his children.
It's creepy, man. Like it turned out that Sam was right. Like every time she shapeshifted, she said she felt like she was giving power to her father,
Makes me wonder how Alex feels.
Yeah. Well, like earlier in this book, we saw how Alex just like with wanton abandonment just continued to shapeshift into all these creatures. So it makes me wonder if like Alex is at all concerned about it. But now knowing what he knows, if he can get back to the hotel Valhalla and tell everyone, maybe that'll wise them up a bit.
Maybe.
Kind of takes away their coolest ability though, doesn't it? I guess only use it if it's like a life-threatening situation and you have no choice. Like the earth is about to drop out from under you. You got to turn into a bird. Sorry. So, but yeah, lots of questions. Also, as much as Jack the Sword says that she's a hot sword, this Skofnung sword, I do not think that would be a good date. Sounds like it's evil. But maybe all hot swords are evil. I don't know. Well, this was fun, guys, and we will continue next week with chapter 18. So we did we burned through a few chapters today. I hope
can't
you all
wait
have a
to
great
hear the
night.
next set.
I know it's going to be great. I hope you all have a great night. And I know I met with a lot of you today. Marie and Clary's mom and